thank you for your time and for allowing me to speak out in opposition to the House Joint Resolution 8.
Thank you. Questions from the witness? Hearing none, thank you for your testimony. Just to, you're done. And thank you again. I think we need to reiterate the process, and that is, if there was a call for a constitutional convention, there would need to be 34 states to call it. They would send delegates with instructions. Those delegates would have to propose amendments, take votes on it. I suppose they could all drink the same Kool-Aid and propose some Minnesota amendment, but before any of them, just so you know, before any of these amendments become laws, 38 states, their legislatures, have to adopt these amendments. The Constitutional Convention cannot enact constitutional amendments. They can simply propose them. Next witness we have is Will Thomas from Windham, Ohio. Welcome.
I thank you for this opportunity to testify today against this bill, H.R.J. 8. I've never testified before, but I feel very strongly about this. And on the surface, this committee is to be commended for trying to establish a balanced budget. However, there's a dangerous precedent that is being set in regards to our Constitution in the United States. I agree with Representative Dyer. The first thing that struck me was there's no determination for a balanced budget during a time of war. Therefore, I find this to be unsuitable wording, which can and most possibly lead to a total dissolution of our beloved Constitution. We are in a time of war, and there's been no timetable set for withdrawal from these supposed terrorist nations. Senator McCain said that we would be in this war for 100 years. Are we supposed to believe that our Constitution would not be usurped by this Constitutional Convention during this time? I served in the U.S. Army, and I took an oath to uphold and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic. I took that oath over 30 years ago, and I will honor that oath until my death. We are on the precipice of losing our sovereignty of our nation, a republic. Notice I said republic, not a democracy where a mob rules. Somehow our appointed legislators have lost sight of what beliefs and principles this nation was founded upon. Lost in the years of translation has been we the people. That's all of you. That's all of us. We are the people of the United States in order to establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, to ordain and establish this Constitution for the United States of America. Representative Huffman mentioned fear. What is it we fear? We the people do not fear a balanced budget. We welcome it, but not by way of a constitutional convention. Our Constitution is hanging by a thread right now. And we're losing our country, people. And I urge you to think twice and think very hard about this. I asked this committee, why are our very own government officials trashing such a brilliantly written document? Our nation has been the envy of other nations for years, in part to the freedom that our Constitution provides each individual in America. This proposed legislation will do nothing to help balance the budget, but rather only further deteriorate the remainder of our once cherished and respected document, the Constitution. This Constitutional Convention only opens the doors to a notorious abolishment of our guaranteed freedoms as granted by our Creator. I'd like to add a couple other things before I close, please, and that's in Hosea 4:6. My people perish for lack of knowledge. Now, I'm not as educated as each and every one of you, or as eloquent, but I have been granted an insight, and I know what's right and what's wrong. And what's right for this nation is to restore our constitutional values and principles that made us a great nation. Without it, we are gone. And we might as well just enter the dregs of a third world country if we lose our liberties and our freedoms. I'm reminded of two stories when I look at this meeting here today. I think of Moses, who led his people out of slavery and oppression from the Egyptians, and I think of these people who are opposing this legislation, and I think of them all as Moses is leading. And then I think of Judas, the betrayer. And we all know what happened to him. And I'm asking each and every one of you to be a Moses. And let's lead. Let's lead out of slavery and oppression that this country is becoming. In closing, while most of you pen this legislation with good intentions, I have found that many good intentions produce bad results. This would be a horrendous result for America. Thank you very much for your time.
Mr. Thomas, thank you for your testimony and thank you for serving our country. Questions for the witness? Hearing none, thank you again. Next witness we have is Robert Owens. Mr. Owens, welcome.
Thank you, Chairman Blessing. Thank you also to the committee for allowing us to speak on this issue. So as to not overlap some of the things that have already been said, let me just highlight a couple of key points from my prepared testimony. First of all, the historical record on this issue I think is very informative. We have had only one previous constitutional convention. It was in 1787, and it was called pursuant to Article 13 of the Articles of Confederation. Now, I think a couple things are important. First of all, what we know from the historical record is at the time that that constitutional convention was called, every single state sent their delegates with specific limitations on what they could discuss and what they could not discuss. And I urge you to take a look at the limitations that were placed on the delegates to that constitutional convention, because they were very explicit. There was no kidding around. They were very clear. Here's what you're allowed to discuss, and here's all you're allowed to discuss. Well, here's what we know again from the historical record. The very first official act that they took was to say, we're going to meet in secret, we're not going to make this a public meeting. The second action that they took was to say, all these limitations from the state, we're putting them in the trash can, and we're going to have carte blanche to do whatever we want. So I know that there are some folks that say, well, there's some protections here because we're only going to have a limited cause that we're going to send for this constitutional convention. What we know from historical precedent, from legal precedent, is that those limitations are valueless. They have absolutely no merit whatsoever. The Constitutional Convention can do whatever it wants. It has a blank check. Second of all, who are the delegates and how are they selected? Again, what we know from our own historical precedent and from the plain wording of Article 5 itself is that it is not the state legislatures that get to select the delegates. No, take a look at the plain language of Article 5, and what you will see is that the states make application for a constitutional convention. But who calls it? Congress. Clearly spelled out in Article 5. What that means is that if this were to be called, and we would look at going forward with this, right now Nancy Pelosi and the Democratic leadership would get to select how the delegates get picked, where the delegation is going to take place, what the agenda is going to be, how they're paid, right? Now, I know that there's some concern and there's some thought that, well, whatever these guys do in Constitutional Convention, it's got to be subject to ratification, so at least we have a safeguard there. Again, the historical record is clear that that is simply not true. Take a look at Article 13 of the Articles of Confederation and the delegation that was sent in 1787, and what you will see very clearly is that only if 100% of the states ratified what they were sent to do, would it become law of the land. Well, that's not what happened. No. Again, when we look at the historical record, what we see is that once the convention was called, they scrapped that 100% ratification, and they decided that only 2/3 would be needed for ratification, and that's the process that was put together.